Welcome to the Early Childhood Personnel Center's presentation of a family introduction to CSPD that is presented by Maren Christensen-Hofer and Annie Neuville. This is an excerpt from a meeting that was facilitated by Darla Gunler on October 13th, 2020.
First of all, I just want to say welcome to everybody and a huge round of applause for the effort that it takes you just to get here in the middle of the day. We're all families of kids with disabilities, and we all know that distance learning and family life and working from home and all the other things that go on put a lot of things on our plates. And so I just want to acknowledge that you are here, and I'm grateful for your attention for a little bit. And if you need to run and go check on a kiddo or whatever it is you might need to do, please feel free to do that. So we're just glad to have you here. And I also want to say, Ted, I really like the Nick Offerman look. That's working for you. So we'll start off here by just a general introduction. As Darla said, this is a presentation that Annie and I together to welcome families to Minnesota CSPD process. And I'm really grateful to Annie. She was really instrumental in recruiting a lot of our parent members. I think we have 8 family representatives as part of our CSPD work, and that would not have happened without Annie's outreach. And that was mainly through our partners in policymaking graduates. And Annie can talk a little bit more about that at the end. But to get started, I'll just go over kind of the introductory process that we provided to family members. Let's see. So we started off by talking, well, no, that's not what I want to do. We just want to go one at a time here. What is a CSPD? And I think most of you who are here are familiar with this already. But when I first started the work, I was a little confused about what it was that we were actually trying to accomplish. And so our working definition was that a comprehensive system of personnel development is a framework to improve the quantity, quality, and effectiveness of the early childhood intervention workforce. Who provides services and interventions to facilitate the development and learning of infants and young children with disabilities and their families. And this all kind of comes back to IDEA, that's sort of our umbrella. And I think I've got another slide here that just shows us that section specifically of IDEA. So if there's any letters in the group that want to get into the really nitty-gritty of what the law actually says, that's where you can find it. Why are we here? We were here working on the CSPD to ensure that our state has a comprehensive system of personnel development for early childhood workforce, and to make sure that the family voice is represented in this work, and that's really important. For me, this was the real reason I was here. This is my little one. He's 9 now, but this was about the time that he was diagnosed with autism. And he is a constant reminder of why this work is important. And there we have it. Why is this work important? This is a quote from the Council for Exceptional Children that really kind of stuck with me. Personnel is one of the most important issues in early childhood education. If we get this right, all else will follow. If we get it wrong, none of the other systems can work. And I'm sure, we are really seeing that every day now, with distance learning where school is happening frequently in our homes, and we get to see our teachers interact with our children, even if it's not normally in-home learning. We know how important it is to have that quality personnel who really understand the systems. And hopefully we've all observed, what it looks like when a really masterful teacher or early interventionist is doing their work and doing it well. We can see what a difference that makes for our children. Our purpose is to ensure that our state has a comprehensive system of personnel development, so that we're complying with the law, basically, to make sure that the different components of the CSPD are working together, to make sure that those systems are accountable, and to make sure that they're using evidence-based practices. That's really the job of the work groups and the leadership team. Each state comes up with its own mission statement for its comprehensive system of personnel development, and this is ours in Minnesota. Every state will be a little bit different, but this is our mission. Each and every child, prenatal to 5, and their family deserves high-quality early care and education. Minnesota's CSPD will guide the integration and alignment of personal development systems to recruit, retain, and empower practitioners to implement and sustain the use of evidence-based practices. And the vision was that every child and their family gets the early learning experiences need to succeed. And that vision statement was chosen very specifically in Minnesota. As some of you may be aware, we generally have a pretty good reputation as far as our early intervention services and our education services are concerned, but we have some really big achievement caps when it comes to serving our communities of color and our multicultural communities. And we wanted to make sure that that was expressed in our vision, that we want to make sure that all services. So who are we specifically talking about when we're talking about these children? We're talking about children receiving services under IDEA, and that's Part C and Part B, and hopefully we're all familiar with that. Who is guiding this work? Each of our states are working with the Early Childhood Personnel Center, that's easy peasy. Thank you, Darla. Thank you, Mary Beth, which federally funded Technical Assistance Center at the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, the UCED at the University of Connecticut. And Minnesota is one of the several states that's receiving this intensive technical assistance. And I think all the families on this call are also from states receiving that technical assistance, where you have the individual work groups for each of your components of the CSPD. I like to bring this up because I think this is really helpful for families that may be kind of new to this conversation. The theory of change behind this work is that if states have this high quality system for personnel development, then more early childhood leaders and practitioners have the requisite knowledge and skills that they need to do their jobs. And that makes the services that they provide of early intervention, early childhood special education, and early childhood services and supports more effective. And that in turn results in improved outcomes for our kids. So that's kind of why we're doing this work and how it fits into the improved outcomes, because that's really what it's all about at the end of the day. What this is not about, it's not about content. It's not about designing syllabi. And I think this is really important to mention, because this is one of the kind of misconceptions that I had early on coming to the work. I had all these great ideas about things that I wanted to include, in the syllabi for early childhood special education teaching. And while those conversations are certainly relevant, and the CSPD work provides opportunities to connect with people who are doing the pre-service and the in-service, and a great place to have those conversations, what we're really talking about here is a system, not specifically the content. So that's one thing I like to be really, really clear about from the get-go. In Minnesota, we have a lot of different organizations at the table. We've tried to bring a lot of groups into the conversation and build on a lot of the work that's been done previously. So in Minnesota, our work is led by the Department of Education, and in the way that our early childhood intervention services are led by our Department of Education rather than our Department of Health or Department of Human Services. So we're a little bit of an outlier in that regard. We also have a number of representatives from universities and institutes of higher education that are educating teachers to become special ed teachers, occupational therapists, physical therapists, nursing, speech therapists, all of the people that work in early intervention. We have our licensing organization, which in Minnesota is called PELSBA. The related service providers that I mentioned, OT, speech, physical therapy, and then other subject area experts. I'm part of our recruitment and retention group, and we quickly learned that there's a lot of expertise out there in the subject of recruitment and retention, so bringing some of those people into the table. Our Head Start organization is another one, that has been working on these issues for a long time, so we wanted to make sure that we were building on that institutional knowledge that already exists. In our state, our ICC has also been a very important part of this work. working with the teams that do outreach into our communities to make sure that children with disabilities are being identified and that we're reaching those underserved communities. That's a really important partner to have at the table. In Minnesota, we have a children's cabinet. Our governor has a specific cabinet to address children's issues, and that is made up of all of the heads of agencies, all of the commissioners in Minnesota. So that's been a really great place to go to have some high-level conversations about policy and to use that children's cabinet as an ally. And then there are, many others. Each state will differ a little bit in who needs to be at the table. But there are, a lot of other people that are joining us in this work, and we want to make sure that we've got all those voices with us. We talked a little bit about what exactly is included in a comprehensive system of personnel development, and there are 6 components, and I'm sure this is something that Darla will go into in a little bit more depth, but at a high level, they are leadership, coordination, and sustainability, the personnel standards, and making sure that the state standards are aligned with other national standards, pre-service personnel development, so before an individual becomes a professional teacher, educator, therapist, that university, college level education, the in-service personnel development, so what happens after they are a licensed professional or a licensed teacher, how are they receiving ongoing training? And then recruitment and retention. How are we recruiting and retaining teachers? And this, I think, was a very important issue before, and it's even more so now. Some of the numbers about teachers and special education teachers in particular leaving the field are pretty shocking. And I think it's not hyperbole to say that we're going to have a crisis on our hands if we don't already. And then finally, the evaluation piece. Are we doing what we said we would do, and how well did we do it? It's really important for all of the different components to kind of go back and double check whether we've actually accomplished what it was that we set out to do. So those are the 6 components of the CSPD. And in Minnesota, each one of these teams, each one of these components has its own team, and there is at least one family member on each team. So we're really trying to make sure that there are family voices in the conversation for each of these components. And we talk a little bit about each component has its own work group, its own plan, its own quality indicators, and that's something that each team will come back to on a regular basis to ensure that they're complying with their own plan, putting your plan in action and then making sure that you lived up to it. And then the quality indicators are usually an assessment that either the work group does individually, or perhaps in some cases they might do them all together to say, does our state have these systems? Do we have some of them? Do we have all of them? Or is there still work to be done? When I first started this work, I will confess that I was a little confused about what was actually expected of me. It wasn't really clear what my role was or what I was supposed to be contributing to the conversation. So I like to be, really like to help families understand what is the expectation. Of course, there's a time commitment, and in Minnesota, we were doing 4 in-person meetings before the pandemic and 4 online meetings, and now all of our meetings are online. The work time, which in our case often involves reading journal articles, looking up evidence-based practices on your particular area. In our case, we're doing a survey, so there's kind of the work time that takes place separately from our meetings that's involved in that. The active participation of family members contributing to the conversation and feeling comfortable doing so and empowered to do so. And then finally, the contribution of your expertise. You've lived these systems, you've seen how they work, and in some cases how they don't work. But that's so important to keep the focus on how these decisions we're making and how these systems we have in place are actually affecting families. And that's something that you are all in a really unique position to offer. To talk a little bit about the role of the parents in work, our job is really to represent the voice of the family. And of course, all families have unique experiences, but sharing our stories is so important to make sure that the work is really rooted in real life experiences. and providing the lens of people who have actually walked this path. I'm sure, many of you have been actively involved as advocates for your children, and, we've all seen a situation where, how the system is supposed to work and how the system actually works are two different things. And so part of our job is to help bridge that gap and make sure that we're thinking about how things really work for families in reality and not just the theory behind them. And we're also here to make sure that no one loses sight of the fact that the purpose of this work is better outcomes for our children. We've all been part of organizations where it's easy to kind of have mission creep or go down a pathway that sort of gets us away from the real goal of the work. And, since we live this every day, we are thinking about our kids and we're thinking about how these decisions affect them. So that is part of our job too, to really keep our lens focused on our children. And somebody mentioned this to me at one of the ECPC meetings, and I really liked it, so I'm borrowing it, and I apologize that I can't quote the person who said this, but if each person has a part of the elephant, we're the heart, and I really like that. That's part of our job as well. One of the biggest challenges to this work, and I'm sure we've all encountered this, is the acronyms. This is alphabet soup. The federal government loves alphabet soup. Our state agencies love alphabet soup. There's so many acronyms, and it's really hard to keep them straight. Each area has its own jargon, and it becomes very clear early on that, even people working in the same department on many of the same issues may have completely different sets of acronyms to describe something. So we really want to empower family members to ask when you don't know, because I can absolutely guarantee you that you are not the only one. One thing that we tried to do in our family orientation is I made all of these little laminated stop signs, and I gave each person one to hold it up when we were using an acronym that somebody didn't understand, or terminology that was kind of a term of art that wasn't clear to somebody. So I think just empowering people and making sure that it's okay to say, I don't know what you're talking about, and this doesn't make sense to me, is really important. And I try to emphasize that the only inappropriate question is the one that isn't asked. A lot of families come to this work and are kind of wondering, what do I need to know? What sort of background do I need in order to be part of a CSB team? And the most important thing, I think, is just kind of a basic knowledge of IDA, understanding, what it is and a little bit of how it works. You do not need a law degree to be part of this work. Having a basic understanding of some of the different systems that are involved in personnel development in your state system is also helpful, but that is a thing that you can learn, and you can certainly reach out to your other team members to provide some of that expertise. And then I think the most important thing that any of us bring is a passion for ensuring that young children with disabilities get off to the best possible start. If you bring that to the table, that is by far the most important of these things. I put in a little glossary here, and I think most of you have probably seen some of these. I won't go through each one individually, but I just want to make sure that everybody has access to a glossary, and each state will be a little bit different. I think ECPC has done a great job of providing some glossaries in terms of art, so those are one thing that's available. But again, if there's a term you're not familiar with, please feel free to ask. And then I just wanted to reference what tools are available, and I think this is something that Darla is going to talk a little bit about a little bit later, but the ECPC website has some great resources available. The Council for Exceptional Children recommended practices is a great place to start. In Minnesota, we have something called the B8 plan, which was all about workforce development for early childhood. So that was something we leaned on heavily. And then there are all the tools within our own outlines that we've developed, our own work plans that we've developed, sharing information between other states. All of those tools are available to help us do this work. And I think I'll share some of those links after we're finished with this presentation. Where can I go for help? Your fellow team members, of course, are available for help. The leadership for your state team, the group facilitators, and I would also add ECPC. You know, there's lots of resources there, and certainly other families involved with other state groups are here as a resource too. I included this just to kind of give people an idea of where Minnesota was on the roadmap when we started this work. You know, we started our comprehensive system of personnel development in 2015, and we had one meeting of stakeholders, and then we had 100% turnover at our Department of Education and the leadership team. So we kind of restarted the work again in 2017 with new people, had a new stakeholder group meet in April, revisited the mission and vision, the leadership team attending that training in Connecticut in August of 2019. And then in February of 2020 was the last time that we were able to meet in person. But all of our work groups have been meeting virtually since then to continue the work. And we're deep into the process of doing surveys, doing research, collecting information. You know, all of our action plans are in process, but that will vary from state to state. I mean, I think we're all kind of in different places as to where we are in our process. So in Minnesota, the next steps were the convening of the work groups, the working on those sections of the CSPD plan, making sure we have the right people at the table and identifying any gaps, and then digging into the work. And that's kind of where we've been, continuing to meet with our work groups. And then I'm just going to finish up with some shameless pictures of my kiddo, because I just share them every opportunity I get, but it's a good reminder of what's really important for me, for why I'm committed to doing this work. And then I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Annie, who is going to talk a little bit about some of the work that she did in recruiting families to join us in the CSPD work.
Thank you, Maren, and thank you for an awesome presentation. I have to say it made it so much easier to recruit people when Maren had put together this presentation so everyone knew exactly what was expected of them. So when I was looking to try to get people, because it was Maren and we wanted to get people to join and have at least one person on each group, I just started thinking about parent leaders. And sometimes it can seem overwhelming, but when I really started thinking about it, for 7 years, I had been networking without even really knowing it. So first I reached out to Partners in Policy Making, and I had a relationship with the coordinator of Minnesota. So he said, yeah, I'll send it out to every partners class. So it didn't just limit it to the class 34 that I graduated with, it hit all the different classes. Then I reached out to my Special Ed Advisory Council. I'm trying not to use the acronym, so we'll see how I do here. And I asked them, because they represent 6 different counties in my area, do you know any parent leaders who might be a good fit for this? I also reached out to I got to think about this one, Interagency Early Intervention Committee, which is our regional, well, I'm also on the ICC, but also our regional work, and asked them, who do you have in your area? Who are the parents that would help with this? And then I followed up on it. And then once we had some interest and the parents reached out, then I just wanted to find out, what do you need to get there? Is there anything stopping you? Because one thing as a parent for me, I never like to ask for help, and I feel embarrassed sometimes to ask about reimbursement or expect it. And so then for me to follow up with those parents and say, hey, can you come to this orientation? We'll pay you to be there. Does this time work for you? What can we do? Can we make it virtual so that you can be there? So we got everyone there. You saw the awesome presentation Maren gave. So they had a clear expectation of what it would be. Could they handle it? Would they be able to make the commitment? And then afterwards too, just following up, how did you feel? Did you feel like your voice was heard? And I just think it's easier to talk to a parent. For myself too, I've been out of the working profession, out of the home for years. So to be sitting around the table with all these professionals sometimes can be a little bit overwhelming. So then reaching out and being like, were you heard? Did you feel respected? Is there something you wish you would have said that you didn't? And just making sure that the parents feel their value, because that is something that was given to me doing the parent leadership cohort through ECPC, because I have been fighting and advocating for, like I said, 7 years, but I didn't really understand what my value was in that. So Um, and I think that's just about it. My part was really easy, just network, following up, and being friends with parents. So, and finding like-minded people who want to help kids. So I guess now I'll pass it over to Darla unless there's any questions or anything else.
So actually, Annie, do you want to just say something about, you had more families attend the training, but not everybody signed up. Do you want to
Correct.
talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we had more families that came, but after seeing the training, some of them couldn't make the commitment and knew they wouldn't be able to. So then they knew from Marin's orientation that, okay, this isn't going to be a fit for me. I have the passion, I have the experience, but I don't have the time, or I don't have the childcare, or whatever their circumstances were. And again, reaching out to those parents to see, is that something we can alleviate for them? Like, can we help them get childcare? We can get you the money for childcare, but with the shortage of professional workers and PCAs, sometimes even that wasn't enough to help them get there.
Great, thank you. Questions for Marin or Annie? Anybody? Yes, Ted.
I wanted to make sure I could, like, you knew I was going to unmute before you went on. Sorry, I was back to school raising my hand. This is for Annie or Marin. What other kind of supports have families requested that maybe Minnesota has provided or is thinking about providing? I know you mentioned childcare as one. Are there other supports or other, I guess, ways that families have been more involved? One of the other things I thought was interesting that you said, it sounds like you do follow up with the families after they've participated. So is that something that's formal, or maybe if you can expand a little on that, that'd be
Sure.
helpful.
Marin, do you mind if I go first? Okay, so now I got to think. So one thing that one family reached out to me and said they couldn't be there because they had no one to watch their child, but they didn't specify what. So then I just emailed back and said, you know, is this about money? Because if you don't have waiver funds or you don't have that, we can get you reimbursement. And no, what it was about is they didn't have any PCA, so there was no one to do it. And one of our unintended consequences of COVID was that we switched everything to being virtual, and that actually made it easier for parents. And it was one thing too when everybody else was meeting. So I'm a rural Minnesota resident, so there was a meeting I couldn't be at. Everybody was there. I was the only one virtual, and I have to tell you, I didn't feel like I was as much a part of the conversation. There was some technical difficulties. It just didn't feel equitable. But now everybody's virtual, so everyone has the same seat at the table. So that's been super helpful. And you had a part 2 question, and now I can't remember it. I'm sorry. What was the second part?
I think the follow-up was, how do you guys like formally provide support to families?
Okay.
Because it sounds like you have some sort of mechanism where either they contact you or you follow up with them after they come on board.
And it actually wasn't real formal. I just, when I was recruiting, I collected everybody's emails so that I could contact, because it's easier for parents to email and get back to you later. So afterwards, I would just send an email without any of the agencies or professionals on it. It was just parents on there, where then they could say to me, you know, was there anything, and actually I don't even think I put Marin on there because she was part of the leadership team, but just so they could say to me if they felt included, what they needed, did they get their reimbursement. And then after COVID had been happening, my group hadn't met for a while, so I assumed no one was. So then I sent out an email, said, is everyone getting their reimbursement? Is everyone meeting? Just to kind of see. And if they have time, and then always just telling them, providing my email, my telephone number, call me at any time if you have any questions. So yeah, it wasn't really formal, just making myself available and there for any questions, I guess. Marin, do you have anything to add to that?
Let me unmute here. Yeah, I would say, again, our systems weren't terribly formal, but I think in particular when we knew that we had a conversation that was getting pretty deep into the weeds or pretty technical, to just be able to follow up with families by text and just say, you know, I know we're getting kind of deep here. Are you tracking? Is there anything that we can go over? Or maybe having a side conversation, you know, back when we met in person over a cup of coffee, or maybe you're texting during the Zoom or something, just to make sure that people, and then, you know, feeling very comfortable saying, okay, we need to stop for a minute. because this is assuming some knowledge that not everybody has. And just making that a very regular part of our conversations, like people feel empowered to say, nope, I don't get it. I'm not following what you're saying here. And letting everybody know that that's an okay thing to do, no matter what the subject. So I think that's been really helpful too.
So can I just add one additional thing, Maren? Do you want to share your very exciting news that MDE actually put money into a position to actually help support some of this?
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was a huge part of it. This whole idea of parents getting paid for this work to be at the table in Minnesota, I will be honest, was unheard of before. It was a really novel concept when I started this work a little while ago. And we had to fight a pretty tough uphill battle to, one, talk about the importance of having parent voices at the table, and two, actually compensate people for their expertise. And I give a lot of credit to Sue Thomas, who is from our Department of Education, and she really went to bat for me, talking about the importance of not only having parent voices at the table, but paying for them for their expertise. And she was successful. She was able to arrange for me to have a contract with our Department of Education. And that was the first time that the Department of Education had paid a parent as a professional consultant, but not the last. So.
Exactly. And if
awesome.
anybody wants to see that, you can see the video actually on the website. So you can see Sue talking about why they chose to do this. And they're truly committed to family involvement on the CSPD.
It's awesome. I just want to do one quick follow-up. I thought Annie brought up a really interesting point that I think maybe we should all do as states to follow up again with families. I know when we reached out to families initially last spring to really get kicked off and be a part of the work groups, a lot of the barriers were things you talked about, getting to face-to-face meetings, or even if they did start participating, they were the ones participating virtually. And I think now would be a great time to maybe have that reach out again, because it's a much more even playing field as far as access to the meetings than it was, 6 months ago.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for viewing this presentation. For additional information and resources, please visit our website, www.ecpcta.org.